And we are live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the very first meeting ever of the Northborough Select Board, formerly known as the Northborough Board of Selectmen. It's May 8th, 2023, and the time is 7 o'clock on the nose. I will call the meeting to order. My name is Mitch Cohen. I am the chair, and I will read some introductory stuff. This open meeting of the Northborough Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Northborough Select Board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Northborough Select Board to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of the meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. I will now go around the virtual room and make sure everyone can hear and be heard. In the order on my screen, Scott Rogers.
Present.
Kristen Wickstead.
Here.
Julianne Hirsch.
Here.
Jason Burrow.
Here.
And staff with us, we have Interim Town Administrator Bob Reed.
Here.
DPW Director Scott Charpentier.
Present.
Police Chief Bill Liver.
Present.
Fire Chief Dave Parenti.
Present.
And from the cable office, we have Owen Jones. Thank you very much. And let's get started. Before we do anything, I just want to let people know why several of us have little green ribbons on. At our last regular meeting a month ago, we proclaimed the week of May 7th through the 13th as Children's Mental Health Week, and the library was nice enough to get a whole bunch of green ribbons to note the occasion, and so I thought it would be worthwhile for all of us to wear it and repeat that designation. That said, first item on our agenda is public input. If there are any members of the public that wish to speak to anything that is not on our agenda, this would be the time for that. I don't see anyone. We'll give everyone a few seconds, see if there's anything else. Going once, going twice. All right, we will move on to the rest of the agenda. We have some meeting minutes to approve. April 10th, 2023.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion for you. I move the board vote to approve the April 10th, 2023 minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Kristen, seconded by Julianne. Any discussion? All those in favor? Jason?
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. We have minuscule meeting minutes from April 24th, 2023, which is our extremely brief meeting before town meeting. Someone like to make a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to approve the April 24th, 2023 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Scott, seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Scott?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Meeting minutes are approved. Next up on our agenda, we have discussion regarding regular attendance of the fire chief, police chief, and DPW director at select board meetings. Bob, why don't you give us a little run through on this?
Oh, sure. I just noticed this at the first meeting that I was a participant in. It's something that's a bit unusual for me to see. I guess the bottom line is that unless these department heads were on the agenda, just personally, as I said, it's something that I hadn't quite seen before, and I'm not sure there's really a need. Obviously, they're extremely important department heads. Their time is valuable. If it's not such an urgent matter, then the public is free to call them, get in touch with their department. And if on the flip side of that, my feeling is that if it is an extremely important or urgent matter, then it's kind of putting them on the spot to give an off-the-top opinion on something that might need a little bit of deliberation or research. So my feeling is that unless they're on the agenda, I think it's a more productive use of their time if they, weren't expected to participate and be on sort of on call on the entire meeting.
Thoughts or comments from members of the board? Kristen?
So when Bob brought this up, I was surprised, and I had wondered the same thing, why they would come to every meeting when they weren't on the agenda. And I can't think of a time when we weren't talking about, say, traffic and safety or something like that, that was on the agenda, that Chief Liver had too much to say, or something else that was on the agenda that he would have something to add. And obviously the same goes for Chief Parenti with his, sometimes he's able to chime in and share information about something, but it would be something that we would know ahead of time for the agenda. So I feel like they say very little, especially the two of them. Maybe there are more things on our agenda that DPW would have something to say about anyway. But I think if we did change it so that all three of them only need to come when there's something on the agenda that they could answer questions about, or that we just ask them ahead of time, can you make it, whatever, that seems very reasonable to me, all three of them.
Any other thoughts from board members, Julianne? And then Jason?
The department head's time is very valuable, and sometimes these meetings can go on for very long, and and it's something that they should not necessarily have to spend their time doing when they could probably be doing something else. The only thing I would question is that if there is something potentially that we're going to need their opinion on, maybe is there some kind of like on-call thing that we could quickly call them and ask their advice?
I could try and work that out with them, perhaps be able to text them, or maybe to the extent possible, try and get some input from them in advance if we see something coming up that we might want some input from them from.
And my last comment would be, are the department heads agreeable to this?
I let them speak for themselves, but I haven't heard anything to the negative.
Okay.
Certainly, if we approve this request, that department heads are always welcome. Jason, you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to say that in my experience, it had been customary for the police chief and fire chief to be at all selectmen meetings dating back over the last 20-something years. Less so for the public works director, but I don't have any objection to a change in policy in this regard. So it's fine.
Good. Anybody have anything else? I mean, I'll add support to the idea of not requiring them to hang around for meetings where there isn't something obvious on the agenda where we'll need their input. All of you put in tremendously long hours as it is. I'm sure you have better things to do either with your work time or with your free time than spend a few hours with us every couple of weeks. And appreciate all of the help that you provide, particularly appreciate Chief Parenti, all of the help you've given over the last 3 years of Zoom time of hosting these meetings now that this has been transitioned over to Northborough Cable, which is great. We don't need you for that, but as I said, you're of course always welcome. As far as I know, this does not require a vote, that there isn't any formal policy in place that we would need to reverse. I think, Bob, you were just seeking consensus from the board. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. I think you have it.
Great. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much to all of you for all the years you have attended all of these meetings.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Select Board. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
Are you all going to leave now?
No, I'm gonna listen.
Well, there are.
Some of the meetings are maybe, but no. Yeah, you know what? My job description says available as needed. If you need me for a selectmen's meeting, I need a phone call and I'll be there in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's not hard. We can just zoom in on our phones.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Metro West Collaborative Development discussion only on the reuse proposal for White Cliffs. I'm going to start this off with just some broad introductory remarks. This is an opportunity for folks from Metro West to join us to answer some of the questions that we posed last time. They did provide something in writing to us, which was in our agenda packet. I know the community is very interested and very passionate about how to save White Cliffs and how the board might eventually vote on this project or this proposal. That vote will not take place tonight. We want to have a little bit more discussion on that. I anticipate we'll have a vote at the next regular meeting of the board, which will be the 22nd of May. The other thing I want to add is, because we're not voting tonight, when we do this, open this up for public input, I would encourage the public to ask questions or provide us information that we may want to ask either of Metro West or of town staff in advance of a vote, and save suggestions as to how we vote, perhaps for our next meeting. I'm going to do my best to limit comments to 3 minutes apiece, and I'm going to do my best to limit us to at most 30 minutes of public input. I know that went on for a very long time last time. It was very valuable. It really, really was. We have a few other things we want to get to tonight after this agenda item, so I wanted to state that up front. But members of the public always have our ears. You can always email us, and we will, of course, open this up again for public input before we vote at our next meeting. That said, I see Caitlin Madden from Metro West in. Caitlin, I'm going to bring, let's see. Something moved around. All right, Caitlin, I'm bringing you in. And then Caitlin, once you're in, if you could unmute yourself and turn on your video if you so desire, and let us know if there's anybody else that we should bring in. Good evening, Caitlin. How are you?
Hi, doing well, thanks. I lost connection while you were allowing me into the room. I also have a staff member with me tonight, Derek Hansen.
Sure. Okay. I see Derek's name. Derek, I'm bringing you in. If you could, once you're in, if you could unmute yourself and turn on your video if you so desire.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening. I want to thank both of you. Derek, I'm not sure if you were at the open house that we had at Town Hall the other day, but Caitlin, you certainly were. You and I had a chance to meet in person. I appreciate your time and your ability to answer a lot of questions. It was a very well attended open house. I think it was very valuable for the community. So I really appreciate that. I'll ask you if the two of you could just sort of identify yourselves and give us any update, anything that you would like to prepare for us, and then we'll open up for questions from the board.
Sure, I can introduce myself and then pass it to Derek to introduce himself, and then we have a presentation that we'd like to run to, if that's okay.
It is.
Great. Okay. So my name is Caitlin Madden, and I am the Executive Director of Metro West Collaborative Development. We are the nonprofit community development corporation that has proposed put forward a proposal for the redevelopment of the White Cliffs Mansion, and I'll pass it to Derek.
And I am Derek Hansen. I'm the Senior Real Estate Manager at Metro West Collaborative Development. And I'm going to now try and share my screen if I can do that.
Should be able to. If you have any trouble, let us know. Great.
Yep, looks like it. All right, can everyone see the PDF?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We're very glad to be back in front of you today to give a brief update on our proposal for the White Cliffs estate. Since we last spoke on March 13th, a few things have been accomplished that are worth mentioning. First, the Northborough Community Preservation Commission voted to support the signing of an option agreement with Metro West so that we can bring this proposal to town meeting in the fall. This is also significant because it indicates the CPC believes there will be sufficient funds to finance the $800,000 CPA grant if the town so chooses. Second, we submitted to the town our written responses, as the chairman noted, to many of the questions that were raised during our previous meeting with the select board and members of the public back in March. This response is publicly posted on the White Cliffs community page for anyone who's interested. And I'll go into some more detail on that shortly. Finally, we hosted a very constructive and well-attended open house at the town office gymnasium last week. Together with our architect DSA, Metro West spoke with many members of the community, including a wide range of views and questions about our proposal and what it would mean for the property in Northborough if the town decides to move forward with us. I also want to specifically thank some members of the White Cliffs Committee who were kind enough to set up a table to share some of their work with the historic significance of the property. Turning back to our written response to the previous board meeting, I wanted to highlight for everyone's reference those topics which were addressed in the response. These include the timing of a traffic study, number of school-aged children we expect the property would attract, costs to operate the property, the paying of Northborough real estate taxes, how tenant selection would work and any local preference, the use of the function space for Northborough residents and organizations, a geotechnical survey, as well as the CPC funding that we need. Should anyone in the public be interested in our response in more detail on any of these topics, again, this document is publicly available on the White Cliffs committee page. And I'll now hand it over to Caitlin.
Great. Thank you, Derek. So we just wanted to take a second to give a quick reminder of the timeline to date and where we are now. So after many years of work, the White Cliffs Committee issued the RFP back in October of last year. And we spent about 6 weeks putting together a really comprehensive proposal, which we submitted to the committee in December of 2022. In January 2023, we participated in an interview with the evaluation committee. And as part of the selection due diligence, members of the evaluation committee came and took a tour of our Glenbrook Way property. They were able to see phase 1, which was completed in 2021, and also see phase 2, which is currently in construction. And then in January, the evaluation committee recommended that Metro West be selected as the developer. We were then asked to present our proposal to the select board, which we did in March of 2023. And as Derek mentioned, last week, we hosted an open house. So all of that brings us to today, May 8th, which is our second presentation in front of the select board. And our goal is to be ready for a special town meeting in September of 2023. So if the select board votes to allow us to move forward into negotiating an agreement to keep on schedule for the state funding rounds, we would really need that town meeting vote in the fall. So it's May now, and if we're going to negotiate an agreement and have additional community process between now and town meeting, we really do need the select board vote this month. So I'm happy to hear that that is the plan. So with that, Mr. Chair, I can pass it back to you and take any questions or comments that you have.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. I do see Lori Connors in the audience, who's played a major role in this. Bob, would you like me to bring her in? It's up to you. I don't know if she plans to to participate, we always welcome her input if she is. Or Lori, if you want, you could raise your virtual hand and I'll bring you in. If not, we'll, there we go. Hand raised.
Hi.
Hi, Lori.
I was just joining this meeting in case you folks had any questions for me
Great.
that might be helpful about this proposal or about affordable housing in general or the procurement process or anything of the like. So
Thank you. I really appreciate your participation.
should you have any?
Yeah, great. So questions from members of the board? Julianne.
Well, I have a few. Should I ask them all?
Well, go for a little while, and
Okay.
if we yawn and nod off, then that will be a sign. I'm only kidding.
Okay. Okay, so for the state's purposes, Northborough has exceeded its share of affordable housing. I know there's a conversation going on about deed restricted and that sort of thing, but in terms of what the state looks at, we have reached our quota. And so my question is, how did the state come up with that recommendation?
So if that's a question for me, I'd be happy to answer it. So the Avalon development, so the way that Chapter 40B works is that if you have a apartment development, a rental development, and the developer is willing to deed restrict 25% of the overall number of units for lower moderate income, then all of the units count as being lower moderate income. So in the Avalon development, you have 382 units. Even though only 96 units are actually restricted for lower moderate income households, all of the units, the entire 382 unit complex counts on the subsidized housing inventory. So that isn't unique to the town of Northborough. That's the way Chapter 40B works across the state for all Massachusetts communities. So that is how we were able to achieve the Chapter 40B compliance. So what that means is that because the town of Northborough has a minimum of 10% of the units on the subsidized housing inventory, then Chapter 40B developments aren't mandated. So any sort of approval, so any affordable units that are permitted from this point forward are voluntary. So it doesn't mean that you should stop doing affordable housing units, because of course for each market rate unit, it changes the percentage. So the more market rate units that are created per year, then you could lose that 10% compliance. So it's always good to continue to create affordable units that keep pace with the number of market rate units that are created.
But that, I don't think that, I guess my question wasn't clear. Why does the state ask every town to have 10%? Is it because if every town did their share, our housing shortage would be alleviated greatly?
Yeah, so the reason why it happened is back in the days when Chapter 40B was first adopted, which I believe was in the 1970s, it was very segregated. So the communities that tended to have low income housing were the cities. And So there wasn't a perception that communities were sharing the burden. So there were some communities that had affordable housing, and then there were some communities that were rich, rich, rich. So they weren't balanced. So Chapter 40B was adopted to ensure that each community was shouldering the burden. So all communities would have an appropriate mix of types of housing. So it wasn't, you know, one community was like just completely poor and had nothing else. And then another community was completely rich and had nothing else. So it was decided that it would be better for communities to be balanced, so that there would be housing for school teachers in communities like Weston, but also that communities like Roxbury in the days when I was growing up in the 1980s, Roxbury was very poor. So the idea was to have more of a middle income as well as a wealthy class in the town of Roxbury. So it wasn't just going to be a poor community.
So, okay, so to just follow up on that, Northborough, according to the state, is doing their part, and they are a minority of towns that are doing their part, correct?
There are a number of communities that are not Chapter 40B compliant, and there are a number of communities that are Chapter 40B compliant. I can't give you the exact mix of how many are compliant and how many are not compliant.
Okay, can I continue, Mr. Chair, or?
Caitlin, I saw you raise your hand. Did you have something that you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, state requirements aside, that I think it's very well documented that housing prices are out of control and that incomes are not keeping up. So, when we talk about affordable housing and who would qualify to live in affordable housing, that includes people who work in the schools, who work in town offices, who work in the local businesses. So I think, putting the state requirements aside, there's real demonstrated need for affordable housing to support local economic development. And so I wanted to make that side point. So thanks for giving me a second.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Julianne, do you want to ask another question?
I do. And if anybody wants to, jump in, please do so. Okay, so my next question is 5 years from now, or maybe 10 years from now, everything is done and our affordable housing problem still hasn't been solved. Metro West or whoever owns it at that point decides that they want to expand. Would the expansion just simply be going before zoning board and getting approval for that?
So when we go in front of the zoning board for this project, because it does not comply with the current zoning, we'll have to get a comprehensive permit, which will list potentially hundreds of conditions that specifically match the exact particulars of this project as we've described it to them. And we will not be able to do anything different. I've had situations where I've had to go back to ZBA in order to get a dumpster approved on a 3-acre site. So it really is extremely granular. 10 years down the road, if we wanted to expand and we had, put together the funding with the state for that, we would absolutely have to go back in front of the town, in front of the ZBA at a minimum to get that approved.
Okay.
Yes, I would just like to follow up on that. As the person who actually writes the decisions for the ZBA, I can attest to the level of detail. So the ZBA decision would specify the type and quantity of streetlights that would be installed on site, the exact landscaping plan, so how many street trees and where they would be located, the particulars about the elevation drawings of the apartment building, as well as the historic mansion, how that would be renovated exterior wise, the number of parking spaces, where fire hydrants would be located. All of that would be specified in the decision. And the only way that that would be modified is if they petitioned the ZBA for a modification. And the ZBA at that time would be able to decide whether they wanted to grant the modification or whether they didn't want to grant the modification. And that would be subject to a public hearing.
Okay.
I have a follow-up related to that, if you don't mind, Julianne.
Oh, yeah, please.
Great. So one of the things that we have discussed relative to this, because of the timing, is the MBTA adjacency requirement that we need to add. I believe it's 50 acres zoned for 15 units per acre. Is that correct, Lori?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
A
good.
minimum density of 15 units per acre.
Okay. So this, in each parcel or project, needs to be at least 5 acres. So this is about 7 acres. So this would qualify if we rezoned for 15 units per acre. That 7 acres would then count towards the 50 acres that we need to rezone. So it's measurable. It's obviously not going to solve the issue entirely. We would need probably at least a couple of other projects in town. That's a law that, whether you like it or not, that's kind of what we've got, but this would be one way that we could deal with this. The question is that if we did that, then my understanding is then the owner of that property, whether it be Metro West or some successor organization, would have by right ability to construct additional units to meet that 15 unit per acre density. The project that's being proposed is about 7.5 units per acre. So my reading of it, I think, is that they would have by right the ability to basically build another building of basically the same size as the building that's being proposed here. They would obviously have to go in front of the ZBA for site plan review and all the things with that, but they would have by right allowance to do that. And so the ZBA couldn't say an outright no on that. Am I understanding that accurately?
So I did follow up with a question to our housing consultant, and I haven't heard back from her. So I can't really answer that question definitively right now. What I can tell you is if this property is not included within the MBTA zoning, then it still is subject to the comprehensive permit. And if the comprehensive permit limits the number of units to 52 units, then that is what will be built. Unless, of course, the applicant at some point in the future, like with any other development, the same is true for Avalon, the same is true for any other development in the town of Northborough. If they were interested in increasing the density, then they could go back to the ZBA and ask for that increase in density. So right now, it is not in the MBTA zoning. So it would be subject to a comprehensive permit. So there would be more controls for the town in that circumstance.
Thank you. Julianne?
But Jason has his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a notes window in front of it. Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Julianne. Just to follow up on that briefly about the density requirement. Is it the case that every site potentially has to satisfy that minimum of 15 units per, or is it just the case that the aggregate of all sites that are zoned that way collectively have to satisfy number of units over total area?
That's correct. So
No
50
one site
acres.
is necessary to reach that density requirement.
So over the 50-acre area, the average would have to be 15 units per acre. So there could be some areas that are less dense. So for example, this is a 7-acre area. So the zoning for White Cliffs could be 7.5 units per acre. But then we would have to make up the density elsewhere. So there could be, like, for example, we've been looking at a parcel of land on Southwest Cutoff. It's 27 acres. We could allow a greater density on that parcel so that the two average out to 15 units per acre. So maybe in that case, instead of it being 15 units per acre, maybe it would be 18 or 19 units per acre over the 27 acres. So there is some flexibility. The smallest area that we can zone is 5 acres, and one area has to be a minimum of 25 acres.
Thank you.
Very good clarification. Thanks, Jason and Laurie. Julianne, or any other member, additional questions?
I have another question.
Sure, of course.
Okay, so I know you answered this in the written response, but honestly, I don't understand how you calculate the property taxes. Could you go over that, please?
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to be very clear that when we budgeted for this project, we included paying Northborough property taxes. So in the way that that works is because it's a commercial property, they will take our income, the net operating income. So it'll be the income after expenses. And then that amount will be divided by what's called a capitalization rate, which is a percentage, usually between 3 to 12%, depending on the type of property in the area. And then that gives you a value. So 100,000 divided by 10% is $1 million. So the value in that case would be $1 million. And then that value, you just apply the Northborough real estate tax rate to, as you would any other property.
Okay.
What did you budget? You said you budgeted for it. What dollar amount did you budget for the property taxes? I think that's going to help us a lot. The formula is very helpful. The process is very helpful. Ultimately, it's about dollars.
Yeah, I'll pull up my budget. Give me 1 second here.
Sure. Appreciate that.
And while Derek is pulling up the numbers, it's obviously based on assumptions about what the operating expenses will be and what the rents will be, and it will change between now and then.
So with Caitlin's, caveat, the amount that we have in here right now is around $75,000 per year.
Thanks. Bob, I don't know if you could take this question to the assessors and maybe ask that department to totally understand ballpark estimate is 75 grand. Do they think that's in the right ballpark? It might be helpful to just get their take on it too. Totally understanding nobody can be held to this, because this is a project that has not been built and there's a lot of variability there.
I will get their best guesstimate.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Bob. Julianne, did you have an additional question? Oh, yeah, we got the dollar amount. Julianne?
I'm okay for now.
Okay. I had a question about traffic studies. So obviously traffic has been one of the concerns expressed by members of the public about this project. It's in what's already a tough spot, and this would increase the traffic. Some say make it harder and more challenging to deal with. In your letter, you said that you would, which you'd certainly be required as part of site plan review, to do a traffic study. The response specifically stated that it would be after town meeting, and I can appreciate not wanting to spend what would probably be $20,000 or $30,000 on a traffic study until you have some level of commitment. At the same time, that might make it harder for the public to understand the impact of the project. So I had one thought, which is the Community Preservation Committee, which has, at least by their letter, indicated that they would be favorable to funding the $800,000 that you're requesting from them towards this. They have the ability within their administration fees to do traffic studies, and they recently did another one in a different part of town. If they were amenable to this, and this hasn't been discussed by their committee, to sort of doing at least some amount of that traffic study up front in between any approval that this board grants and town meeting, would you be okay with sort of saying, well, that $20,000 or whatever it cost, that would be acceptable towards the $800,000? So you'd still be getting $800,000 of value from the CPC. If you want to think about that and get it back to us later, that's okay. But that was one way that I thought about maybe a way of resolving some of these traffic questions ahead of town meeting. I guess it's a question to you, Caitlin. Scott, did you want to say something before Caitlin chimes in?
A follow up on that, because I wasn't clear on then what would be the sequence of events. So the traffic study that would be part of going through the permitting process. When is the permitting process done? After a town meeting vote to move forward? Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear on that. Thank you.
Right, and I can speak to this a little bit. I understand that it probably feels like, voting before all of the information is in hand, but that is typical for how our projects move forward. So, it was a similar process in Hudson and Newton and Medway, where we were selected as the developer, agreed to a disposition agreement. And that agreement allowed us to move into the community process and into the zoning process and start to do that real due diligence, including the traffic studies. So, the vote that would be before the town and town meeting would just be on that agreement. It would not be on a final project. That agreement would allow us to move into the next phase, which was when we would do the traffic studies. And obviously the zoning board would weigh in on the appropriateness of the proposal once we had that information.
So back to the question that I asked about the timing of the traffic study and whether if CPC funds, community preservation funds, the traffic study before town meeting, whether that might work for your timing, as well as would that be understood that would be part of the $800,000 that you would need in total from them?
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, I think that sounds like something we would definitely be open to. And we would just need to talk more about the details. I'm assuming that it would be something that the CPC would move forward on, independent of a grant agreement with us. But yes, we would be open to considering that. Yes.
Great. Okay. Jason.
Yeah, I just would want to check that if a traffic analysis was conducted prior to, say, a town meeting approval, the subsequent process of reviews and everything wouldn't carry back and require additional traffic analysis or a different, a new traffic analysis at additional cost. Is it the case that the one that would be conducted preliminarily would serve as the traffic study for the rest of the process going forward.
Yeah, this is a concept we would need to work through those details. My gut feeling is, maybe we could get 80 or 90% of it done, but some of it would by necessity need to wait until everything is drawn up. And whoever did the study might need to follow up. Lori.
Yeah, typically we like to see traffic studies done within 12 months of submission of the permit application. And of course, we would want the traffic study to be in conformance with what we typically require for a traffic study as outlined in our regulations. So as long as those parameters are met and the period of time between doing the traffic study and actually applying for the permit does not exceed 1 year, then I would think that would be fine. We would need to, of course, for the traffic study, have a firm understanding about the particulars of a project. So 52 units is what I understand. The number of bedrooms has already been set, but we would also need to understand about the function space and how large that would be, what the accommodations would be.
Great. Thank you. Answers that question. Members of the board have additional questions? I have one more. Oh, sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to, and this might seem like sort of a very basic thing, but I haven't heard anyone address it. Reading all the emails from everybody on both sides of this issue, it often comes up the number of units that you want to put in this spot is very high. And then when you talk, you say, the town meeting vote would just be to, choose you as the developer, and then not specifically what plan gets built, right? And that comes later. So is it possible that if it did get to that place and it was approved at town meeting, would you work with the town to be able to say, and listen to people who really don't want a really large development up there, and make it much smaller? Or would that really not be on the table because it's financially too expensive, or it just doesn't make sense for what you do, what your nonprofit does?
Yeah, so the short answer is that the budget right now there's no surplus in it. So we need every dollar of revenue in order to basically make it work and break even. And that's how affordable housing is budgeted, so that there's no surplus and there's no gap. You just try to zero everything out. All of your sources and uses match.
Right. So it doesn't make sense for you to do change the number of units, really.
That's correct. We would need 52 units to make it work.
Okay, 52. Okay. Thank you.
My next, I think my last question for today. I know you are submitting this and requesting us to grant this as a local initiative petition or a friendly 40B. And then we also talked about zoning changes later to comply with the MBTA adjacency requirement and so forth. Is the friendly 40B process required for this to work for you? I don't know. I'm familiar with what the process is from the town side. I don't know if there are other things that triggers on your side, or could we in theory do this without a friendly 40B, but with town meeting approved zoning?
Yes, so that is a very good clarification. Our preference is that we do this as a friendly 40B with a lowercase f. So we actually would not want to do this as a LIP. So we would prefer to have, town approval and to work with the town collaboratively. But then we would be basically submitting the application on our own as a private entity.
But what about, so I'm glad you clarified that, because I didn't realize there was a difference between friendly 40B and LIP. But the question about doing either of those versus just a change in zoning, sort of, for example, if the board approved an option, but that option did not include LIP or friendly 40B or whatever you want to call it, but was contingent upon town meeting approval of a zoning change that was consistent with what you want to build, does that give you the ability to move forward, or is there something else that that limits you on?
I'm gonna let Caitlin jump in.
Yeah, so I think the reason that we prefer the friendly 40B path is it's something that is familiar to us and something that we've worked through on multiple projects in the past. I think that and that was kind of the timeline that we had assumed in our RFP response, was moving forward under that path. If there's a change to move forward under MBTA communities, I think there's just questions around how quickly those pieces could come together, and the details of how it will work, because it's a very new legislation. So there's just real potential for scheduled delays under that path. So those would be some of our considerations, and our preference would be to go down the path that we're familiar with at this point.
The reason I ask is a friendly 40B or a LIP is, it's essentially, it's a change in use. It's a change in zoning that the Select Board, has authority over, which is something that the town has grappled with from other boards, the zoning board particularly having the ability to allow changes in use of zoning. And I don't like that process very much. I would rather hand that to town meeting to have town meeting make a decision as to whether something is appropriate in a particular zone, a particular parcel or not. That's just my own personal preference, thinking about a lot of the pros and cons of this. We're not voting tonight. I might ask you to look at that a little bit and possibly get back to us with any additional thoughts as to whether that would be a workable solution in advance of the meeting in which we're going to take a vote on the project. Appreciate I'm throwing this at you now. It's totally fine that you don't have an answer for it.
Right, and I guess I would add that I do think that if the select board were to vote to approve our selection as the developer, then ultimately the town meeting would be to approve the agreement, and then it would really be in the hands of the zoning board to work through the comprehensive permit application. So I would not anticipate that we would need to come back to the select board in that scenario.
And I think that's the key difference between a LIP and a friendly 40B. In a LIP, you would be a co-applicant, the select board, as the town's representative would be. In a friendly 40B, it's just us. So we would be the only applicant going to the ZBA.
So with the friendly 40B, does the select board granting the friendly 40B give you the ability to have increased unit density than what is currently in that parcel? Or is that already expected to be rezoning under town meeting authority?
So I think the agreement would be with the select board, which is what we would then vote on at town meeting, which would allow us to get our project eligibility letter. And that is the first crucial step we need in order to be able to go to ZBA and say that we are here to get a comprehensive permit under Chapter 40B, which is what would give us our increased density.
A follow-up question then, and it's okay if the two of you don't know the answer, but maybe someone on staff does. A zoning change requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting. Would town meeting approval that you just described would that be a simple majority or a 2/3?
That would be a simple majority. It's my understanding. So the disposition of property is a majority vote. Is that correct, Rob? Bob? Sorry.
Yeah, as far as I know, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So any
Disposition
zoning
is majority.
change is a super majority vote. So it's a further bridge to cross.
Yeah. So that's where I see a big difference, is that asking town meeting to approve a zoning change is by necessity, and I think it's appropriate, a higher bar to reach. That
you could set forth in the agreement that goes before the town meeting vote the parameters. So in that agreement, you could say we want 52 units. And we want, first floor access for public events. And so that provides you with the power that I think you are seeking. And then
honestly, it's power that I want to remove from the board. It's power. I want to give town meeting the authority. I think town meeting should have the authority over use, not the select board.
Well,
if we can do that in
ultimately,
another way, that's the same threshold. That's essentially the same thing.
Ultimately, the Board of Selectmen has the power to negotiate the agreement, and then town meeting has the power to approve the agreement. And then the approval of the actual project rests with the ZBA. So if there were to be a zoning change, the zoning bylaw could be detailed, or it could be very minimal. It hasn't been written yet, so I can't really say what it's going to look like. But what I can say is that it's going to be a by right approval. So what that means is that whoever becomes the permitting authority, whether it's the planning board or whether the ZBA, it hasn't been defined as of yet, they have to approve the project, subject to site plan review. So there are, so essentially what that means is that if the developer complies with the requirements of site plan approval and whatever the zoning bylaw sets forth, then the planning board or the ZBA, whoever it is, doesn't have the power to deny the project. So if the planning board or the ZBA chooses to deny the project, then the chances is very good that the town will lose on appeal.
Sure. Again, what I'm interested in, at least one of my concerns with this, is the select board having use variance approval, essentially by saying, well, this parcel that's currently zoned for single family homes could instead be used for multi-unit housing, where in a different scenario, that would be a decision that would be left to town meeting.
It really isn't. The Board of Selectmen really won't have that power. The power will rest with the Zoning Board of Appeals.
But the zoning board wouldn't, if this is approved by simple majority at town meeting, the zoning board, I mean, honestly, if town meeting approves it, I hope zoning board wouldn't deny it anyway, but you're saying that they couldn't no matter what. The difference that I'm seeing is a majority of the select board being able to essentially change zoning by granting it as a friendly 40B, where if this was not a friendly 40B, it would need to be a 2/3 majority vote to change the zoning at town meeting. And I apologize if I'm not clear.
The Board of Selectmen is not making that decision. The only party that can alleviate the zoning is the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it's essentially like a comprehensive permit is like issuance of a variance. So it works very similar. So the Board of Selectmen is not in that position. It's the ZBA that's in that position.
Okay. I'll I'll follow up with you separately rather than
Okay. Yeah, I'd be
continue to
happy
talk
to
about
talk to
this.
you offline.
Yeah. Again, my concern is if this is something that if we were not talking about a friendly 40B or a LIP or anything like that, and it was just a developer wanting to just build this on this parcel, would it require a zoning change by town meeting? If so, I'd rather see it go that path for that piece of it, but we can follow up on the details rather than sidetrack it. Any other, Scott?
Yeah, I was just going to fall into that because I think bringing in the hypotheticals of MBTA adjacent zoning or other zoning changes, I think that muddies the water here, and on what is really just in front of the select board, a decision to whether we're going to stop the process midstream or complete the process that we started. So we engaged in a process of soliciting proposals, having a committee determine the best one, bring it forward, and we're 80% complete on an ongoing task here. And the final step is to make a decision on whether moving forward or not, to get all the details and work through all the projects. So I think that's going to make it easier for the board to make a decision when that happens, to be, is this a proposal to move forward and complete these steps that would then define the project in more detail, and knowing how it would go before town meeting and the zoning board of appeals. I think we can keep it simple.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Julianne?
What is a LIP?
I'll let staff or Caitlin or Derek answer that question.
I'll go first, and then Lori can fill in the details if she wants. So a LIP is a local initiative project, I believe, is the acronym, and it's basically a type of 40B where the town itself is a co-applicant to the ZBA and to the state for the project to be accepted as a 40B. And it's useful in cases where a town is trying to hit a certain threshold. They will sometimes initiate a project so that they can have even extra control over how things go. There are some issues about exactly how involved the town wants to be, because you don't want to trigger public procurement laws, which can make these projects much more difficult financially. But basically, that's the key difference. The town is actually applying on behalf of the project with the developer, which would not be the case here if you did a friendly 40B with Metro West.
Thank you.
Thanks. Members of the board, any additional questions or comments? Any other members of staff have any additional input or questions before we open it up to the public?
No.
Okay. We'll open it up for public input at this time. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I'd really like to keep comments focused on questions that the board can ask now in advance of getting those answers in advance of a vote at a subsequent meeting. And I'll ask folks to keep it brief, 3 minutes or less, and we'll cap it at 30 minutes or less, or much less if there aren't a lot of questions. First person who has raised the virtual hand, Lisa Maselli. Lisa Maselli, if you could identify yourself and state your question or comment.
Good evening, Lisa Maselli, 13 Maple Street. Just 3 quick ones. In the course of getting grants, and right now it looked like you were going out until 2026, maybe even 27 to complete those grants. Will there be any construction going on until you receive all those, or do you have to wait until you get them in? Second question is, if you don't get them in, what happens to the project? If for some reason in 2 years, the state goes bankrupt because of everything else that's happening right now, and you don't get the grant money, what happens then? Do you get to sell the property? What happens to the project? And the third question is, at what point do you start working on the mansion to make the mansion usable and restored? Before or after all of this?
Thank you. Yeah, those are really good questions. So on the first question, as far as when construction would start, so we would apply in the state's funding round, which is January of every year. And they may require us to do that twice, which is why you referenced it might push out to 2027. And that's just depending on how many projects they receive applications for. Assuming we get it in the January funding round, we may find out in May that we've received funds. And then there is potentially a 4-month closing period where we basically sign all of the documents with everybody. And so construction would start in, I guess that would be like, fall of that year. And so then at that point, construction would start. So let's say if we applied in, January, received funding in May, construction starts in the following fall. That would be how it would work. And then the construction period might be 13 months. I think that's what we've assumed, although we haven't actually got a GC yet to tell us the specifics. All right, second question, what happens if we don't get the money because the state goes bankrupt? We would not have the town, ideally in our case, we would not have the town convey ownership of the property to us until we had received the financing and closed. And that would basically remove that as a concern because if we did not get the funding, you just wouldn't convey the property to us and the town would continue to own it as it does now. And then the third question, I thought I wrote it down, but can you remind me what that was?
When will you start to do the restoration on the mansion? Before or after all of these units are built?
Right.
First thing to do or the last thing to do?
Thank you. So again, we haven't spoken to a GC specifically about the schedule, and they would definitely have input, but the overall idea would be that the renovation of the mansion happens concurrently with the new construction. So at some point during that period, whether it's exactly the same duration or a little bit shorter, but the idea would be that they happen at roughly the same time.
All right, so the first question, though, got a little bit more confusing. Do you have to wait until you get all of your grant money to start construction? Or are you going to do certain amounts of construction once a year while you're getting payments each year? No, we do have to wait until we get all of the money, but that will not take until, like you said, 2027. That final 2027 date is, and it could be 2026 again, depending on when the funding comes through. That is when the building would be complete.
Okay. Lisa, I'm going to move you back to the attendees list and give folks a little bit more of a chance. If you have additional questions, you can raise your hand a second time. Thank you. Okay, next up we have Norm Corbin. Norm, if you could identify yourself and state your question or comment, please.
Sure. So you can hear me okay?
We do.
All right. So Norm Corbin, 35 Whitney Street. Caitlin, Derek, thank you for coming tonight. This has been very informative for me. I had a couple comments. Whoops, excuse me. I don't want that to happen. My current goal has been in the last few months, it's really been to bring the decision of White Cliffs to a town meeting vote and not be rejected by up to only 3 members of the Board of Selectmen. Property was purchased as a town meeting vote, and I think any decisions going forward with the property should be decided by a town meeting vote. So I just get the feeling, even with this evening's conversation, we're trying to shortcut the vetting process. And I think the proper way is town meeting vote. If it goes forward, we can properly vet all of these questions that are being addressed. So that's my first comment. The second one is a concern I've expressed it to you earlier, Mitch. I'm a little disappointed right now in the Board of Selectmen. We've had the proposal from Metro West. We've had that available to you since late January. So it's been 3 months and it's taken a long time to get it to have a priority here. What's concerning me now is the vote will be in 2 weeks. Scott won't be here. Jason won't be here. They've heard 3 months of input, community input for this project. Now you'll be taking the vote in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, the 2 new board members will have been on the board for a total of 12 days. How in 12 days are they going to be able to take all this information that's been reported to the board? So I'm really disappointed about that this vote was not taken tonight, last week, or a couple of weeks ago. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norm. So initially, we had talked about when to schedule this, and our interim town administrator, Bob Reed, approached me and I think strongly urged, I don't need to put words into your mouth, you can certainly amend or correct, to wait until after the election. Is that correct, Bob?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, next up we have Anthony Servideo. Anthony, I'm bringing you in. If you could unmute and identify yourself, please.
Hi, Anthony Servideo, 26 Stratton Way. Just have a couple questions. So what upgrades would be done to the mansion itself to make it ADA compliant? And just a ballpark estimate of what that would cost.
We don't have the level of design detail yet where we would be able to give you anything resembling an accurate figure on that specific part of the construction scope. As far as ADA compliance in the mansion, that is a very tricky question. We would still need to work that through exactly what would be both required if we wanted strict compliance with the rules, and then also what could be achieved just based on the fact that we will also be working within the Secretary of the Interior's historic renovation guidelines, which will hamstring us on certain things that we would otherwise do. I'm sorry, that's probably not a super satisfactory answer, but that is definitely one area that we need to look into a lot more once we can really get into the zoning process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to add that our goal would be to achieve the highest level of accessibility working within those historic constraints.
So just to make sure that I understand, you're saying you will absolutely make it ADA accessible, but because it's also a historic property, there might be some restrictions within some aspects of ADA accessibility that you might not be able to meet, correct? Okay.
That's right. And I think I'll just note one other challenge. I think, the first floor is relatively easy to achieve accessibility. It's the second floor that's a challenge. Introducing an elevator or a lift while maintaining the historic integrity would be a challenge. So we just have to, get in there with really highly skilled architects and contractors and our historic consultant and work through all those considerations.
Thanks. Next up, we have John Marr. John, if you could unmute and identify yourself and let us know your comment or question, please.
Hey, John Marr, 44 Weston Terrace. A question for the board, I think, for just a little bit more clarity from my perspective. But when the proposal was submitted, does the town have the ability to seek kind of changes to the proposal at all?
I'll do my best to answer this and then ask anybody else to weigh in. That the proposal is the proposal, but if the board does grant this to move forward, we negotiate an agreement under the details of that, and that would go to town meeting. Within those details, we could, in theory, negotiate some changes to the proposal as long as it wasn't substantively different, where it might be, really a different proposal from the start, such as. Sorry, go ahead.
When is the public allowed to ask for suggestions or edits to it? And my thought process to this or idea is, instead of just granting the property, considering the town owes it today, if the town could take some sort of profitability in conjunction with the developer in the form of a possible ground lease of the land versus just giving the property away. That way the town is inclined to receive some revenue streams and some upside to the deal versus, again, just granting the property over to the developer.
The first time I'm hearing that idea. I don't know whether that would be consistent with the RFP or work with the developer, but in theory, we could propose this and negotiate that and see where it took us. That negotiation, some of the details staff would work out with between the town and the developer, but ultimately it would come back to the board, which would be, of course, a public meeting, and the public could weigh in. I wouldn't be surprised if it may take a couple of meetings of discussion before something was ironed if the project moved in that direction. And of course, town meeting would have an up or down vote at the end of the day in that. So there would be multiple opportunities for public comment and input into the process. Lori.
I'd be interested in hearing Derek comment on this. However, I know during the procurement process, one of the things we had talked about is the fact that a lot of the funding that Metro West is seeking would not be eligible to them if the town were part of the equation. So if the town were to retain ownership of the property, it's my understanding that they wouldn't be eligible to get the affordable housing tax credits and the historic tax credits, which would pay for a lion's share of their redevelopment. Derek, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so what you said, Lori, is generally correct. However, in the case of a 99-year ground lease, in that case, we would still be able to get our tax credits. However, just to set expectations, the price that we have offered the town for the property is just the nominal sum of $100. So there is not, as I said, much revenue to be shared above what it costs to run the property.
Thank you. John, thanks for that question. That was interesting, what I hadn't thought about before. Next up, we have Rick Leaf. Rick, I'm bringing you in. If you could unmute and identify yourself and state your comment or question, please.
Hi, Rick Leaf, 30 Wiles Farm Road in town. I just want to comment again on some of the discussion that's been going around tonight and other nights around affordability and the 10% and kind of what that all means. As Lori stated, we're above 10% because of the Avalon Bay project. I think in a letter that our housing corporation submitted to the select board, we'd indicated that our effective rate of affordability in Northborough, if you subtract the market rate units at Avalon out of the total, is about 6% of the units on our inventory are actually affordable in terms of how they're priced. I think that there is a continual need, not just in Northborough, but all communities, to talk about people that are struggling to find ways to live, or people that are in more expensive types of housing that are looking for less expensive housing to get into. And I think that we need to be cognizant in our town that we have that need. This project is one alternative way of satisfying that. I'm sure there are other ways of satisfying it also. But I just want to make sure we're clear that our effective affordable housing number in Northborough is about 6%, not the 11.5% that we're reporting to the state. And the state gives us the ability to do that because the state was trying to encourage rental housing to be built. And in doing that, they allowed market rate units to count in projects that had a certain percentage of them being affordable. But I think we need to stay cognizant in our town of where our needs are and how to address those. So I don't think that we continue to say that one of the reasons we don't want to do affordable housing is because we're at 11.5%, because that's a little bit of an artificial number. I think we also have to keep in mind that the MBTA's community project doesn't require affordable housing to be built. I think that's something that towns would look at to do. But if we're talking about the MBTA community thing that we're going to have to step up to, that doesn't guarantee that any of those units would be affordable. And as Lori brought out, if we have to build a significant number of units for MBTA communities, and it turns out that most of them are not affordable, it's going to do a number on our 11.5%, which is going to require us to build more affordable housing. So we just need to keep it in front of us where we are, where we're going, And let's not continue to say that affordable housing for any reason is not needed in Northborough because we don't have to do it. My feeling is we have to continue to look at it and do it on a continual growing manner in the town of Northborough. So let's just keep that in mind as we weigh our decisions going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. Very well stated. I don't see any other hands up in the audience. Are there any other questions from the board or comments from the board? Let's see. I saw Scott a fraction of a second before Kristen. So Scott first.
Yeah, this might be a follow-up from one of the points that Norm made. If a decision is made later in the month, we have entering members that have been quite public in their opposition, not only to the proposal, but the overall process. I'm a little bit concerned whether members who have already pre-decided or might have otherwise prejudice, if such a member should recuse themselves as an abutter, as being very vociferously against and having, in the past called this board and this process malfeasant, a dereliction of duty and folly. And if that's the case, it might be a consideration whether that member should not participate in the vote on this project.
I'll just state that I'm certainly aware from a couple members of the public that have contacted the board with a similar question. The state ethics rules are that individuals decide whether they should recuse themselves or not, and the board itself can't direct or should not suggest any such action. So I could take a guess as to who you're referring to with your comments, Scott. That person has been suggested to get some detailed guidance from the State Ethics Commission. I hope they do, and I hope they follow that guidance. That's all I can say there.
I'll have some comments at the next meeting then on this item. Thank you.
Look forward to your comments as an audience member, Scott. Kristen.
I would just like to just review really quickly for those of us who couldn't make it to your information session. I had a conflict. So I didn't get to hear all the comments that people were saying and everything. And so I'm still processing all this information. So I'm sorry that my questions seem to be a little clueless. Sometimes I'm worried that I'm coming across kind of dippy, but I just want to make sure that I'm taking it all in. So it's 52 units of affordable housing, but it's a large building with 3 stories in it. And so total, what is the number of units in the building?
Oh, in the building?
Not in the house, in the new building that you would build.
Preliminary 48, 49. We're thinking 3 or 4 units in the house.
Okay, so 48 or 49. What was the 48 or 49?
Units in the new construction, the 3-story building.
Okay, so that aren't affordable housing?
No, all 52 are affordable.
Oh, I see. Okay, so that's your 3 or 4. I see. And if I remember correctly, the housing in the house would be upstairs, right? So,
Yep.
And the downstairs would still be some sort of community space?
Correct.
And you were still working out how to, because did you have any antique homes or anything in your other properties? I feel like you didn't, but I could be misremembering. No?
We haven't done an antique house. We have renovated a historic school into housing.
Okay.
And our architect, Davis Square Architects, has done a lot of historic projects. We also have Public Archaeology Laboratory as our consultant, and they're one of the best.
Okay, and so the 3 or 2 or 3 or 4 units, whatever, would be in the house, would be upstairs, And that's why you were talking about ADA accessibility. I get it. And then the third floor, do you have any idea what that might be?
Not specifically, in that we haven't done the design of the interior of either building yet.
Okay. Okay. But did anybody throw ideas for that out? Was it more, I mean, it wouldn't probably be apartments. Would it be, who knows, right?
I genuinely don't know if there would be a way to incorporate it into an apartment layout. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and as far as the traffic study situation that was brought up earlier, do you have any idea, and I realize this is probably not something you can answer, but I'm going to throw it out there. Do you have any idea if they would consider like a light on Route 20 at the driveway of this, or is that you need the traffic study before you can answer that?
I don't have anything. I don't have any idea.
Okay. Okay, so there's a lot we're still figuring out. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Caitlin, were you going to say something a minute ago, or did Derek answer what you wanted to say?
Yeah, just on the traffic light, I know that there's been a lot of, concerns about the existing conditions there, and we've heard from a lot of folks on that issue. And our control, our ability to make improvements in the public way will probably be pretty limited. But I will say that we often, the state really wants to encourage housing development. And if there is a proposal for affordable housing in town, that might spark some renewed interest in funding public improvements. And I think I've said this at other meetings, but I'll say it again. Another example of that is our project in Medway. There was a great interest in connecting some of the neighborhoods to the downtown center. And when our project was proposed, the state then provided a grant to the town to create a sidewalk to make that connection. So it's just an example of, if the town steps up and provides housing, it often can have a shift in the willingness of other public investments. I cannot guarantee that. I do not control the state, but that has been our experience in the past.
Right. Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Julianne.
So 2 questions. One is, and this question was brought up to me the other day. Are you going to be hooking up to public sewer?
That is the intent. Yes, we have not had a very detailed conversation with engineering yet, but that would be our hope.
And does anybody here know if we have capacity? Because we do share sewer facilities with Marlboro. Oh, hi, Scott.
Hello. Through the chair, we do have adequate capacity to support more development, including housing at this location.
Okay, thank you. And
both
the
water
other
and sewer.
Sorry?
Both water and sewer.
Great. Okay. And the other question is, and it kind of goes back to the chairman's idea. So there was, there's concern that building might involve some blasting of ledge if you discover that there's ledge there. Could you figure out before town meeting whether that is necessary? Because I think blasting ledge, could affect neighboring homes, the structure of neighboring homes, and that's an important piece of information to have. So would you consider if CPC gave you money for that to do it before?
Yeah, one good thing about the design is we don't have a basement, so there'd be very little subsurface excavation that would need to happen in the new construction building. And a geotechnical survey would absolutely be something that we would do during due diligence. I think in the same way that we would consider the traffic study, we could consider the geotech as well.
But that timeline would be after town meeting rather than before town meeting, unless we funded it, correct?
Correct, yes. But if the CPC was willing to do the same thing you suggested with the traffic study, there may be a path forward for the geotech.
Answer your question, Julianne?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. One additional hand has gone up in the audience. I'm going to say that this will be the last public input on this item. Amy Paretsky, bring you in. If you could unmute and identify yourself and state your comment or question, please.
Hi, Amy Paretsky, 47 Indian Meadow Drive, and I'm on the planning board, but I'm speaking as an individual planning board member, just talking to what Rick talked about with the MBTA communities. He stated that there may be a concern with the MBTA that we dip below our 10%, but I know being on the planning board, if we go forth with any MBTA communities project, we can stipulate that there has to be at least 10% affordable housing, which will keep us at the same level that we're at. So if there's 300 apartments added, we'd add 30 affordable housing units, and we wouldn't dip below the 10% or the 11.4%. We would want to keep it the same. So I just didn't want any board members to be concerned that if we have to go forward with the MBTA communities, that it would cause us to fall below the 10% of our affordable housing.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate it. All right. Unless there are any other questions or comments from the board, such as Julianne and later Jason. Julianne.
I'm sorry, but I have so many questions. Okay, so there's you have, I think, briefly outlined how what the criteria for applying for these units, the 30% threshold, and I think the 70% of the median income in Northborough. But could you walk us through, so say I'm applying, I have to fill out the application. Where does that application go? Who decides? And is there a priority list?
Yeah, I can give a high-level overview. I will also say that we wrote a pretty detailed response in the PDF response the last time. So if you want to review after, there's some stuff there. So the first thing I'll say is that the tenant selection plan process is something that has to be laid out in advance of the project receiving any funding. And it's laid out and reviewed in excruciating detail by the state DHCD. And so they basically make sure that it complies with all of their fair housing and affirmative marketing rules. Once we get that approved, the process of the affirmative marketing basically begins 6 months before the end of construction. And we would have to, or our third-party property manager would put print advertisements out there in pre-selected local newspapers, as well as some newspapers that cater to demographics that English as a second language, for example, is often something that happens. It would have to be posted on the Housing Navigator site, which is basically a clearinghouse that the state has created for all subsidized affordable housing. And then we would also usually hold like an in-person session in the community for individuals who, weren't tech savvy or something and wanted to come and ask face-to-face questions. So then that's the marketing piece. Once people have decided they want to apply, they all need to submit a pre-application that will say things like their income, their housing makeup, demographics information. And that application is both online and as well usually in a printed form at some town office or a library. We would
before
have
you continue, before you continue. So the application asks for income, a description of their family. What do they have to declare any assets? And what else? What are the
specific items that are on the application I could get for you, but I don't know well enough off the top of my head to tell you right now.
Okay, that'd be helpful. Okay, sorry I interrupted. Please continue.
No, that's a good idea. I can send you an application from another project. All right, so then basically anyone who submits a pre-application would be entered into the lottery pool or pools that they qualify for. And then the lottery, we would have a lottery agent, someone who administers these lotteries. Metro West actually does this for other developers. So it could be us or it could be someone else. And then there's a process for pulling names basically who would then be fully qualified, go through the detailed process of making sure they actually qualify for the unit. And then they would be offered the chance to take the unit, and we basically move through the list that way. There is an opportunity to do a local preference. The state currently allows up to 70% during initial lease up to be local preference. That would be people who are Northborough residents, work in Northborough, or have a child in the school system. At least one member of the household, I believe, would need to meet that. And so we could have a local preference as well.
So in the lottery, if everybody's in the lottery together, there's no priority for a person who currently has no home. There's no list like that.
Well, that is a very granular question that I don't want to answer incorrectly. So it might be better for me to get back to you on it. There are instances of preferences for people with disabilities or something like that. But the exact specifics, I'd want to, get you exactly the right answer.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Jason, I think you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is my last Board of Selectmen meeting after town election tomorrow. I will be out of a job. And so I did want to go on record as saying that it has been a lengthy process following the acquisition of White Cliffs to try to find a disposition for that makes some kind of sense and is feasible. It hasn't been easy. It's a problematic property in some respects. And with the proposal that has come through the RFP process, I'm impressed that it touches upon a few different aspects of our master plan. I'm impressed with the credentials and track record of the applicant here. I understand there are certain objections or certain concerns of abutters. Any disposition of this property is going to be problematic in some regard for the people who are in the immediate vicinity. And so, in my opinion, the goal should be to try to provide a positive outcome. And we have many projects upcoming on our plates, capital projects of significant size and cost. I think that this is a good avenue to pursue. It's an avenue I would support if I was still going to be a voting member and voting on this application. So I do take the comments of Mr. Leaf very seriously. In fact, I had essentially emailed the board immediately prior to this meeting to try to provide some clarification in that regard. And I'm pleased to say that my numbers were pretty much on target. And I want to thank Lori Connors, planning director, for responding quickly to confirm that. But it's clear that the state criteria and the state 10% threshold, we satisfy that criteria kind of by accident and by virtue of the way the units at Avalon Bay are treated. And 3/4 of those units are counted as affordable housing stock, and they're really not. They're market rate rental units, and our effective affordable housing stock is down in the mid-single digits. That's the practical reality. It is something I think we should address, and we should take advantage of an opportunity like this to try to make some forward progress in that regard. So thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate having had the opportunity to comment. That's my position on this project, and it's a position I'll support as a private citizen following my departure from the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Any additional comments or questions from board members or from staff or from Caitlin or Derek? Okay. Kristen.
11th hour comment. I just want everyone to know I'm still very much on the fence on this. I haven't made up my mind.
Appreciate it. All right. I think that concludes discussion today. If members of the boards have additional questions, I would encourage you to email Bob, who can dispense with the questions and set them off in the right direction to get answers. And I would certainly encourage the same. We have town election tomorrow. I think we have a pretty high likelihood of who the new members will be, given the fact that there are two people running for two positions. Both have certainly been engaged in the process, and both were joining as attendees in tonight's meeting. So I suspect they'll be able to get up to speed quickly. And I would ask, as soon as they are elected, if they have questions, to similarly email Bob. Caitlin and Derek, I thank you very, very much for your time. And we will be taking the next step at our next meeting on the 22nd of May is my expectation. And we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Sure. I've tried to send them both to attendee land. There we go. All right. Okay, next up on our agenda, vote on interview subcommittees recommendation to appoint Dave Durgan, Scott Stocklin, and Miriam Ibrahimi to the Town Administrator Screening Committee. Would someone from the interview committee like to report or simply make a motion?
Well, I guess I'll just make a few comments. Julianne and I were very impressed with everyone who threw their hats in the ring, and we appreciated all the thoughtful comments they had for us. And it is going to be a very time intensive, although temporary, committee, but for probably about a month or 3 weeks, they will be very busy, and we really appreciated them volunteering, because I mean, I unvolunteered. And granted, it's a particularly busy time for me and my family, but I also just appreciate that they all threw their hats in the ring, and they all seem to have various helpful things to add to the committee.
Thank you. Would you like to make a motion?
I would, if no one else is commenting.
Scott?
Yeah, just I was unable to watch the proceedings on the interview. Just any thoughts on the selection of Mr. Stocklin versus Mr. Hutchins?
Julianne,
So first of all, I think we have all agreed as a board that it's important to welcome everybody, and when people step up to volunteer, that if other people are already serving on committees, that we give everybody a chance to volunteer in town. So that was one thing that affected our decision. The other was that Mr. Stocklin has a lot of finance experience, and of all the candidates, I mean, we will have somebody from appropriations and finance, but Mr. Stocklin has a lot of experience with that, as well as interviewing. So, and there will be a lot of interviewing. So in that regard, he offered some unique talents there and skills.
Thanks.
Now, is there a motion?
there is. I move the board vote to appoint David Durgan, Scott Stocklin, and Miriam Ibrahimi to the Town Administrator Screening Committee as recommended by the Select Board Interview Subcommittee.
Second.
Motion made by Kristen, seconded by Julianne. Any other discussion? All those in favor, Kristen,
Aye.
Julianne,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Congratulations to those members. Next up, we have vote on the to appoint the Planning Board Chair, Carrie Martinick, Appropriations Committee Chair, Tim Kalin, and School Committee Member Bryce McKnight to serve as delegate members on the Town Administrator Screening Committee.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
I move the board vote to appoint Carrie Martinick as the planning board's representative, Timothy Kalin as the appropriations committee representative, and Bryce McKnight as the Northborough School Committee's representative to the Town Administrator Screening Committee.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Jason, seconded. I'll give it to Scott. Any other discussion? I will note to point out it's not formally on here, but as I think everybody knows, I'll be serving as the board's representative on that committee, and look forward to that entire process. I see no other discussion. All those in favor, Jason.
Aye.
Kristen.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Julianne.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Thank you very much. And thank you and congratulations to those members. Next up, we have vote on interim town administrators appointments of William Pierce, Judy Boyle, and Dario DeMar to the town offices feasibility study committee. Bob, do you want to give us a little update on this before we take action?
Only that certainly the committee needed another member. Mr. DeMari was brought to my attention. I spoke with him at town meeting. I felt it would be good for a committee of this nature to have an architect on it. He has a great deal of experience, as well as does Mr. Pierce. I think it would be good with his background to have him on the committee. Ms. Boyle was brought to my attention by a couple of board members who are in favor. I would like to have an odd number on the committee. Of course, she was appointed just more than that fact. Like I said, she was brought to my attention by board members who favored her and is a very interested member of the community. So these would be my recommendations. I have spoken to an additional applicant. By the way, we did open up the application period as Mr. DeMari had not applied or sent in a resume during the first application period, open application period. So we reopened it. And I have spoken to the other individual who has applied to be on the committee, explained about my decision, and actually I think would be a good candidate for perhaps some of the financial positions, whether it's appropriations or capital planning, and may speak to her about that. But these would be my recommendations to complete the committee.
Thanks, Bob. Is there a motion? Or any other
Mr.
discussion?
Chairman, I move the board vote to approve the interim town administrators appointments of William Pierce, Judy Boyle, and Dario DeMare to the town offices feasibility study committee.
Okay, Scott, I saw your hand up, so but I recognize Julianne's made the motion, Jason has seconded, and Scott, you have comment or question?
Yeah, just Bob, if you could mention who the additional applicant was.
The one that wasn't selected?
Yes.
I know I'm going to mispronounce her last name, but Lisa Holovnia.
What was the first letter on that?
H. Holovnia. Who was very gracious when I spoke with her. I think she has an excellent financial background. And I think she understands for a project of this nature, not having as much building experience as the other applicants. But I think she has an excellent resume, and I think that I would speak to her about being in addition to some of the financial committees that the town has, which I understand have some openings.
Great. We'll keep an eye out for.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Scott, for the question. That was a good one to ask. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor, Julianne.
Aye.
Kristen.
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Again, thank you and congratulations to those new members.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Bob.
If I might, we will move forward with trying to coordinate an organizational meeting for both of these committees. I've also spoken to MRI that I expected that the screening committee would be appointed tonight. So we'll try to coordinate with them to come to the first meeting, the organizational meeting of the screening committee, and just to help explain to this committee the process, how it's going to work, timeline, schedules, etc.
Sure. And I don't remember if I mentioned it at the prior board meeting, but Kristen has volunteered to serve as the board's representative on the town and the offices committee, the town offices feasibility study committee.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
That's
That's all right.
Hard
It's
to remember.
it's going to be a really important committee.
Yeah.
I think this one, because it isn't just town offices. It intersects with other projects going on around downtown that I think it's going to be a real interesting one to serve on. So thank you, Kristen, for being willing to do that. Reports. Before I begin reports, I would like to offer Scott or Jason the opportunity to go first or last, or do you not care? What's that?
I'll be happy to go first.
Okay, Jason.
No more poetry tonight.
You couldn't beat that. So that was great.
I know,
That was
right,
really great.
right. I shouldn't even be at this meeting. So, yeah, I just want to thank Town Clerk Andy Dowd and Assistant Town Clerk Karen Wilbur and the town meeting workers for all the work they did to conduct town meeting and get us through the process. Also, Town Moderator Fred George for conducting the meeting over 2 nights. We were kind of touch and go on the second night, trying to get a quorum in the room, but managed to do that and get all the business concluded. So that was very good. And likewise, they've been working to conduct town election tomorrow. So in advance, I will thank town clerk, assistant town clerk, and the election workers who will be doing the work tomorrow to get us through the town election. And just, yeah, just briefly, I just want to thank once again the department heads, interim town administrator Bob Reed, assistant town administrator Becca Meekins, finance director Jason Little, public works director Scott Charpentier, police chief William Liver, fire chief Dave Parenti, and I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, planning director Lori Connors, for at various times I think working at town meeting at the podium to do the presentations, to provide the information to the attendees of town meeting so that we could get through the process. And just appreciate working with them throughout the years and wish everyone well. Several people I'm leaving out, town engineer Fred Litchfield, Robo, so just many people, Allie, just great group of people. And I've been very thankful to and appreciative to have worked with them. So that concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jason. Scott, do you want to go now, or do you have any preference to go last?
No preferences, so I'll go now. First, a quick update from Recreation Department. Allie asked me to make a few announcements. Saturday, May 14th, they're having the first Jacob Rogers Memorial Pickleball Tournament at Ellsworth McAfee from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. They're raising, one of the goals of that is to raise children's young mental health awareness. All funds are going to SHINE, which is an organization that helps educate parents, kids in school, educators how to successfully communicate about mental wellness. Thursday, June 22nd from 1 to 4, also at Ellsworth McAfee, the second last day of school celebration. All are welcome. They'll have games, prizes, giveaways, and more. They'll be able to meet all the departments in town. Last year we had over 800 people, and so looking forward to another great day on June 22nd. On June 24th, it's a Saturday, 9 to 12, community yard sale, also at Ellsworth McAfee. All 30 spots have been given out. But love to have everybody in the community come stop and shop there. There'll be a lot of great stuff to look through. On July 15th, they're running a Block Island trip. They'll leave the middle school at 7:30 a.m. take a bus out there and board the ferry. You'll have an hour and 15-minute bus tour on the island and then lunch at the National Hotel. Come see the rec department for more information on that trip. And then lastly, there's a Challenger baseball program starts this Tuesday, May 9th, tomorrow. And they do need more buddies to help the participants who have varying physical and mental disabilities. If you or someone you know might be interested in helping, please call the recreation department. Middle school age through adults are welcome to volunteer. And having done some of the Challenger programs in the past, I can definitely vouch that you'll get more out of it than you put into it. So I would encourage folks to volunteer in that respect. Then finally, final report. Ditto to items that Jason said in terms of recognizing individual staff and department heads and residents and other boards, committees, and commission members that I've interacted with. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and allowing me to do my best to represent and to advocate for folks. So it's been a good ride and look forward to the next step. Thanks a lot. End of report.
Thanks, Scott. Julianne, do you have any reports tonight?
I do. So first, I would like to thank the Community Affairs Committee for organizing another successful town cleanup, but also to acknowledge the many, many volunteers who came out that day to help. And that day was followed by the grand opening of the Doors exhibit at Ellsworth McAfee. And if you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to go and have the experience of appreciating that public art project. MPIC met last week and we reviewed the options that Weston and Sampson will show us at the community meeting on May 11th. So that meeting will be at 6 p.m. at the library, and we really need many participants to give us your thoughts and opinions on the different plans that they will present for downtown revitalization. And I'd like to thank Jason and Scott for all of their work that they've done volunteering on behalf of the town, and wish you both well as you move on to other things. And finally, there are really no words sufficient to express my thanks to the, and I assume all of our thanks to the fire department and the many fire departments that came to put out the fire at Mount Pisgah a few weekends ago. It was an unbelievable effort, and I'll say thank you, but it's not enough. That ends my report.
Thank you, Julianne. Kristen, any reports tonight?
Yes, sir. So I attended the most recent meeting of the DEIB committee. The town will be doing an ADA self-evaluation. Surveys are available on the town website and also in town buildings. So the library, the senior center, and the town hall, paper copies. Public input will be the full month of May. It's been going on since May 2nd. It goes on till the end of the month. And then the DEIB committee will go through it and present to us, meaning the select board, in early June with their findings from the survey. I also volunteered for Take It or Leave It Day last Saturday. It was beautiful weather, so that was lucky. Thanks so much to Ingrid, the chair of the recycling committee, and Fred Litchfield, our town engineer, for organizing it. It was really, really well done. It was very efficient. There wasn't a big long line of traffic down Main Street like a few years ago. They reorganized the drive around, so that was good. And people brought carloads of useful stuff that they didn't need, and other people found things they could really use. And then there was also metal, cardboard, and hard plastic recycling dumpsters, and those were used too. So it's a really great event. I would love to see it happen more than once a year. I bet we could do it twice a year, and it would still be really popular. Because if it's just once a year, maybe you can't go that day, you know. So just a thought. Karen Ayres from the Regional School Committee shared some wonderful news with me about things happening at Algonquin. The robotics team qualified to travel to Houston over April vacation for the World Championship. The robotics team had never qualified before, so that was exciting. And it's basically the Super Bowl of robotics. There's 50,000 people there, and they did great. They came in right in the middle. And I only know they came in right in the middle because I heard a couple of dads at the recycling day talking about it. I'm pretty sure, I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they said out of 60 or so teams in whatever group they were in, they came in the 30s. So they did really well. And then also several members of the Algonquin DECA team traveled to Orlando for their national championship. So we have all kinds of kids traveling around the country doing amazing things. And athletic director Mike Masserino applied for an athletic uniform giveaway and received the donation not to exceed $50,000 from BSN Sports Ultimate Victory Uniform Giveaway. So basically, it's a grant of $50,000 for new uniforms, so the kids don't have to wear tomahawks on their uniforms anymore. So it's a wonderful thing that they can get the uniform replacements with the Titan logo. Love that. The Social Studies Department also received a grant for a genocide education grant, and the amount of that was $24,500. And I personally have always been really, really impressed with the Algonquin Social Studies Department. They've changed the way they did things from my oldest to my youngest, who's a senior now. And my youngest has had such a wonderful experience in that department. And I would just like to thank them and all those teachers. And I love how they're doing things. They're so enthusiastic and wonderful. So I'm sure Mitch will say this, but tomorrow is our town election. So please vote. And then I have a quote by Marian Wright Edelman, who was the president of the Children's Defense Fund. She says, democracy is not a spectator sport. So I would like to thank both Jason and Scott for tossing their hats into various democratic rings, including the Northborough Select Board. Thank you for your volunteer time.
Thank you.
That concludes your report, Tristan.
That ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of things, some of which are repeats, but first I want to thank and congratulate firefighter Michael Gaudette and Captain Fred Hurst of the fire department for many years of service to the Northborough Fire Department, and congratulate them on their retirements. I want to echo what a couple of other members have already talked about. On April 29th, we had both the Louise Hill Town Cleanup and the Get Outdoors kickoff event at Ellsworth McAfee. I love both of those events, and some of the artwork on the doors this year are fantastic, as is not obvious by what's over my shoulder here. I'm a big fan of that event and was lucky enough to win the auction for that door last year. I will not tell anybody if I'm going to bid on a door or which doors this year, so that nobody bids against me. But that bid is opening, and the doors are visible and outdoors at Ellsworth McAfee through the 10th of June. Remind everyone that as the board has such voted, May 7th to the 13th is Children's Mental Health Week. Also thank everyone for coming to town meeting and making it a success. And of course, to remind everyone to vote tomorrow. That's important. And lastly, I also want to thank Jason and Scott. It has been my pleasure to first watch you as members of the board before I joined, and then served with you on this board. We've agreed most of the time, disagreed occasionally, and that's okay. That's part of the process. But I really need to thank you both for the time and commitment you've shown to the town of Northborough. The board and the town are better off for you being served, and we will miss you. Thank you. That ends my report. Bob, did you have anything under reports this evening?
No, I think I'll have more for next week, probably an executive session, but no, not tonight.
Okay, great. Last item on our agenda is execution of a couple of cemetery deeds. Would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I will finish where I began. I move the board vote to execute cemetery deeds B-152 and 1167.
Second.
Motion made by Jason, seconded by Scott. Any discussion? All those in favor, Jason,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Julianne,
Aye.
Kristen.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Deeds are approved. Anybody have any other business to come before us this evening? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn from either Scott or Jason.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made by Scott, seconded by Jason to adjourn. All those in favor, Julianne,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:06 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Good
Good night.
Good night.
Night.